Now we go into part 3 of my analysis of DC Comics 2000. This is the second half of the book. Instead of the Justice League of Society, we have the number 2. We have the Justice Society of America, the Justice League. We have now Justice Society. In here we have the Alan Scott Green Lantern. We have Spectre to his left. And we have Dr. Midnight. We have Jay Garrick Flash, Hawkman, don't see Hawkgirl, Dr. Fate, and Starman. These are the original JSA as depicted from the 1940s, kind of captured in tribute to the year 2000. Pyre, Zemeckis, Rollins, and Kalis put it together. And Pyre really does a really nice job here. And on the back of this, we have the Justice JLA captured between two robots. So let's see what's all about. There's more of the same. T.O. Morrow conquering the robots. He's got his toys. He wants so badly to control the future. I mean, to control things, to control soldiers. There's a whole metaphor here. We go back to his Buck Rogers dystopian type of future. Now here, instead of Gideon, if you remember Gideon from Legends of Tomorrow, we have a Tomorrow giant brain-sized robot who, just like Gideon, kind of keeps track of what's going on with time anachronisms and any discrepancies. Here, T.O. Morrow is trying to figure out a cure for his cold. Is that even possible? Well, his machine thinks it does. So he goes back in time. Morrow goes back in time to deliver a microwave in 1940 or 1941, I think. And so it's like, oh yes, instant coffee. Here it is. At this point now, he's cured of his cold, but now we have these birth defects, mutilations of people. Every time you do something, it's like in any time travel story, what do they tell you? Don't step on something, don't touch anything, because the littlest thing you do can alter the future in ways you can't imagine. I think that was Abraham Simpson telling Homer that, but I don't know. I remember my Simpsons episodes. And there is more to do with the JSA. Here's the JSA of the 2000 era, the current members. And you just see right now, Jay Garrick is full of regret. He doesn't know really what to do. Now, Jay Garrick, I don't remember how, but Jay Garrick, Wildcat, Ted Grant, and Alan Scott stayed young throughout the many decades from the 40s to the 2000s. I forgot how. Either it was a magic potion or it was a magic spell or some other thing. They stayed young throughout those years. So it's a little bit of BS, but that's how we see Jake Garrick in the year 2000, the same age. Actually, he's about maybe in his 50s, but he would be in his 50s in the 1950s or 1960s. So it's a little confusing, but that's just how some members of the JSA, the senior members, stayed 30 years younger than they should be. And as we go back to 1941 with the original JSA, we see, what do we see here is of course, a digital camera. Can't see it too well. Digital camera, television, and what's going on here, right? So there's more things. You got a scientist holding a CD, compact disc. I say the long words. Wait till we get clear here. Clearer, sharper image. It's hard to do that. Let me see. Let me try a little better than that. Okay, there we go. So now we have all these. We have the machine guns. We have floppy disks. We have things throughout the next 60 years. And they're trying to figure out, oh, this is great stuff. This is good. See, we have all this technology. We can put it to good use. But of course, Jay Garrick has a different opinion. Everyone has I mean, the Hawkman and Hawkgirl don't agree. Dr. Midnight doesn't agree. Dr. Midnight says, look at this. I mean, we got an artificial heart. We got compact discs. We got Walkmans. We've got nuclear missiles. We got things to help us grow and even like prosper. And Dr. Midnight kind of brings back what or brings up what the Spectre had brought up, was what he saw in his vision was this dark future of rioting and uh, I said the Cold War, but I think I meant to say the Korean War, where soldiers were still fighting, and even the Vietnam War, and all these things of hatred and bigotry and social injustice, fighting the man, fighting the system, fighting corrupt politics, forming groups, forming new groups, tattoo gangs, juggalos, emo, ska, skateboarding, punk rock kids, all these things that are happening because we go through these different decades and different years of living life, living human life. And so Jay Garrick, says, this is the negative side, but we have to see the positive side of the future, and this is what is the positive side. And not even he knows, at least he doesn't know at this moment. He knows in the year 2000, but he doesn't, in this time period, he doesn't really have an idea, but he knows that it can't be that simple of everything's barbaric. The Spectre cannot be right. So, of course, what does he do? He quits. Dr. Midnight volunteers to take over. Like, that's going to really do much here. But we get a look at Dr. Fate and the Spectre having a conversation about, what is the right thing to do and what isn't the right thing to do. And the Justice League figure out a way to get out of that bubble that they're in. And we have more of what is weighing in on Jay Garrick's conscience and what is the right thing to do. What can he do to save the tomorrow to that he is looking forward to, even if he can't see all of it. And right now we have the other heroes, Sandman, Hourman, and the original Adam, going into the World's Fair and finding these robots that you would imagine from 1940 to be the future. They go in, they find all this stuff, they find all these things, and all these wonders. And then trouble arises, a robot comes to life and attacks. And I like this part where, he tries to rip off the head, thinking it's so simple. And out comes this robot that looks like it's something from Brainiac or Transformers movies, these CGI-looking things coming out of the robots. It's a lot of generational concepts and ideas. A lot of things, and we're just getting started on this. And of course, somebody saves their lives. Jay Garrick has a conscience after all. I mean, he's not a bad guy. He just doesn't want to see the wrong things happening, and he still wants to destroy this technology. But Sandman isn't having any of it because think of what good it can do, and they think he's a traitor. But it's like, here you look at this, and it's like, is Sandman doing the right thing? Is the Atom doing the right thing? Is Hourman doing the right thing? Does any of this really matter? And is this really important for them to be stopped? Eventually, Batman convinces the Spectre to let them out. And Spectre and Batman now have to do a sort of a mind game wrestle or a wrestle of souls. And it's a kind of a tricky one. Meanwhile, the Flash has to get the other superheroes out of that bubble and out of 1941 and go back to that weird future. Now, there is a slight plot hole here. And that plot hole is, yes, they use the cosmic treadmill to go back, or some sort of hyper wheel, or I'm not sure exactly how. So they're all back because Aquaman needs to go back because he's been out of water for a long time, and he needs to go back to like a Bacta tank or some kind. So they're back in 2000. So the question would be in this plot hole, and I have an idea or two, is if the Justice League, if Dr. T.O. Morrow had changed the time, right? How did the Justice League know about that to begin with? You can't change the time. You can't go back and fix a problem unless you know there was a problem to begin with that contradicts something you already know, right? So while T.O. Morrow has that giant computer brain, here there is Hourman, the Hourman of the year 2000. This guy laying on a slab. And Hourman says, it's actually out. So the original Hourman from the Golden Age JSA is Rex Tyler. And Rex Tyler, his descendant, creates a an android, or in a few thousand years, they create an android capable of going back and forth through time, or manipulating time conservatively if necessary. So he's sort of like Tio Maro, but in a benevolent way. But he's able to monitor time periods. So there could be a backstory that these superheroes led very different lives, and our man remembered. It's like if you think of yesterday's Enterprise, Guinan was the only one who knew that there was something wrong with the timeline and that the timeline was changed. Here, our man is the one that knows the timeline has changed. So could it be that the superheroes were not superheroes in Tio Maro's future, and they changed to superheroes after our man stated the facts and they went along with it? There could be a whole story that I wish that was clear in this book. That's why I could never give it a perfect 10. This book cannot get a perfect 10 for missing those details. So Aquaman goes back. He goes to find his home Atlantis in ruins. There's nothing left of Atlantis except the sick people and distorted people who are left. And now it's, Aquaman is pushing to move. Let's move the schedule up to kick his ass, because I've had enough, and this is not happening again. Meanwhile, we're dealing with Spectre, Batman, and Superman, who have decided that Batman and Superman are not to be trusted ever. And I kind of like when he freezes them. Here's what Batman says, and this is what I was pointing out last time. I find you guilty. You are already infected by fear. You're, for all your control, all your power, the future, you can't control the future, and that frightens you. So what Batman is saying is right. If Spectre cannot control the future, it's not something that he'd rather just box it up in a box or a globe. That's why when you look at the ending to the first book, you think that that's the right ending, but it looks really wrong. But you're not sure why. And for some people who saw a lot of that stuff happen, who lived through the 1960s and 70s and 80s, you would think, yeah, didn't Spectre do the right thing? Is there something wrong with the JSA rewriting history? But the problem is, it's not the JSA finding these discoveries on their own. A villain, a bad guy, is manipulating everything. He's the puppeteer. He's the puppet master, making sure everything happens a certain way. So you can see the Spectre is reacting to his fear by putting Batman and Superman in cold hard stone. The future things are affecting everything that's happening. The way of radio vision, should be television, right? All the marvels of the world, shouldn't say Marvel. Finding early cures for cancer. I mean, look at that. I mean, this was like before the bomb dropped, and we finding cures for cancers. We have J. Edgar Hoover. Now, keep in mind also, too, as far as cancer goes, there was radium back in the 1920s, and people embraced radium. And I think that was like the first signs of radiation, like troubles with radium. And you had Madame Curie. If you remember Madame Curie with uranium, then you had the radium, and then we had nuclear bombs, nuclear missiles, and nuclear power plants in the 60s. So we had a very different, the 50s and 60s and 70s. If it wasn't for that kind of thing about nuclear power plants and the nuclear age, you wouldn't have the Marvel superheroes. So it's kind of it's a lot of things going on. You got J. Edgar Hoover with electro surveillance. You've got A-bombs. You got Air Force One ahead of time. You've got all these wonders. And what must Tio Maro, as a child, what must he be thinking? You see him as this mean-spirited kid when he's playing outside, but when he's there, he seems like perfectly harmless. But there's more. I mean, there's more to this child. I mean, like, that when he becomes an adult and when he's a child. And you'll see that really direct analogy in the next part.